Adam was standing in a narrow back alley behind a large electrical appliance store. It was late, and he was waiting to receive a shipment. He leaned his back against the store's cold concrete wall, put his hand in his pocket, and took out his phone to check the time. The screen showed 11:58 at night. He raised his head to check the road. At that moment, he felt a sudden chill pierce his back. The solid concrete wall behind him was no longer solid. He felt as if the texture of the concrete had turned into a cold, viscous liquid that was slowly swallowing him. Adam tried to lunge forward to break free from the stickiness, but his feet slipped on the asphalt as if the floor had disappeared beneath them. He fell backward hard, passing entirely through the concrete wall as if he had fallen into a deep, dark well. He didn't hit anything during the fall. He landed hard on a thick, damp, spongy carpet. He got up quickly and looked up. There was no concrete ceiling and no night sky. He was standing in an empty, fully lit square room. Adam got to his feet. He looked around. He was no longer behind the store. He was standing alone in the middle of an empty square room. The walls were covered with pale, peeling yellow wallpaper. The floor was covered with an old wet carpet that emitted a strong, sickening smell of mold. He raised his head upwards. The ceiling was full of long, white fluorescent lights, emitting a loud, continuous, electrical hum that filled the place. Adam turned around. No doors, no windows, no furniture, only the yellow walls that stretch out and lead to narrow corridors and other completely identical rooms, extending to infinity. He took his phone out of his pocket and checked the screen. There was no coverage, and the time was frozen at 11:58 at night. Adam walked through the narrow corridors. He turned right, then left, dozens of times. The rooms never changed. Every room led him to another room completely identical in size and shape. The yellow wallpaper, the damp carpet, and the continuous electrical hum. There was no difference in any corner. Adam tried to leave a mark to know his path. He took keys out of his pocket and scratched the yellow wallpaper forcefully to make a clear cross mark. He walked for half an hour continuously, thinking he was getting farther away. He entered a new room and stopped suddenly. He found the exact same cross mark scratched on the wall in front of him. He realized that he was going in a vicious circle, or that the place was constantly repeating itself. He continued walking for 3 full hours. He took out his phone and checked the screen. It still showed 11:58 at night. The battery level was decreasing, but the time was completely frozen, not moving. The loud and continuous humming of the lights started to cause him a severe headache. The smell of mold made his breathing difficult and uncomfortable. He stopped in the middle of one of the rooms to rest a little. He leaned his back against the wallpaper and placed his hands on his knees to catch his breath. At that moment, he heard a new sound breaking the humming of the lights, a rough cracking sound followed by a heavy and wet footstep. The sound came from the corridor he had just left behind. Adam raised his head and stood frozen in his place. He held his breath to hear clearly. A second step sounded, then a third. The sound was approaching at an irregular speed. They were not normal human footsteps. They were much heavier, striking the damp carpet forcefully and randomly, as if something huge was dragging extra limbs behind it. Adam immediately ran forward. He did not turn around to see what was standing in the corridor. He crossed the first room, then the second, then the third at his maximum speed. He turned left through a narrow corridor, then right towards another room. The wet footsteps behind him suddenly increased in speed. The unknown entity was following him precisely and was not getting lost in the corridors. The faster Adam ran, the faster the footsteps chasing him became. The humming of the lights above him rose to a very irritating volume, as if reacting to the thing's approach. The wet, spongy carpet under his feet hindered his movement and made him stumble. But he continued his blind running to escape the sound that was now only a few meters behind his back. Running is no longer an option. It has become a survival instinct. Adam runs at his maximum speed and never looks back. The humming of the lights above him has turned into popping. The bulbs explode one by one, their shards raining down whenever the unknown entity passes beneath them. Darkness swallows the corridors behind him with terrifying speed. The sound of slimy footsteps is no longer distant. The entity is now meters away. Adam hears the sound of a massive body scraping against the corridor walls, as if something huge is squeezing itself through the narrow passages to chase him. The wet carpet pulls his feet down like a swamp, but he kicks the ground hard and continues his frantic dash. He turned right sharply. He slipped, and his shoulder slammed into the yellow wall, but he instantly regained his balance and ran forward. He lifted his head and was struck by a disaster. A dead end, a solid yellow wall completely closes the corridor. There are no other rooms, no right, no left. Adam turned around. The distorted black shadow appeared at the beginning of the corridor. The entity completely blocked the way back. No escape. Adam retreated slowly, his eyes wide with terror, until his back pressed against the blocked wall. At that moment, his hand felt something different, the texture of hard, cold wood. He turned quickly. Right in the middle of the yellow wall, there was a door, a massive door of dark oak with a shiny brass handle. An impossible design that did not belong to this rotten plastic place in any way. The entity let out a sound like a drowning rattle and lunged toward him with insane speed to devour him. Adam didn't think. He gripped the brass handle with his trembling hand. He pressed it hard and threw his weight forward. The door was not locked. It opened inward. He threw his entire body into the darkness. He turned as he fell to the floor and kicked the wooden door with his foot to close it with all his might. The blow that struck the door from the outside in the same second nearly tore it from its hinges. The strong wood cracked, and the brass handle shook violently. Adam crawled backward quickly while watching the door, expecting it to shatter and the entity to enter at any moment. A second blow, a third blow, then silence. The annoying hum of the lights stopped completely. The suffocating, rotten smell vanished in a single second. Adam pants loudly and wipes the sweat from his face. The air here is very cold and fresh. He placed his hand on the floor beneath the darkness. He did not touch damp, spongy carpet. The texture of the ground was rough, hard asphalt. He had escaped the yellow maze, but he realized immediately that this door had not returned him to reality, but had thrown him into a deeper level. Adam slowly rose from the asphalt. He turned back to check the wooden door that had saved his life, but he found nothing. The door had vanished completely into thin air. He was standing in the middle of a wide, lonely asphalt road. Light flooded everything here, a perfect American residential neighborhood under a provocatively clear blue sky. Two-story houses lined both sides of the road with extreme regularity, featuring bright green, precisely trimmed grass. Cars were parked quietly in the driveways. Adam walked 2 steps and froze in place when he noticed something strange. There were no shadows on the ground, no shadows for the cars, no shadows for the trees, not even a shadow for his own body. The lighting was cast from all directions, and the atmosphere was deathly silent. There was no rustling of trees, no sound of distant cars. An absolute and terrifying stillness pressed against his eardrums. He ran toward the nearest parked blue car. He pulled the door handle, but it was a single solid piece with the body. He cupped his hands around his eyes and peered through the side glass. The interior of the car was just a solid gray void, a massive plastic model from the outside only. He immediately rushed toward the house. He climbed the steps and knocked violently on the wooden door. The door was as solid as a concrete wall. He moved quickly to the glass window and looked inside. It was pitch black, but his eyes adjusted to the darkness only to realize the catastrophe. The house was merely a thin wooden facade. There were no interior walls or furniture, a huge, completely empty box, like cheap cinema sets. Adam stumbled backward until he returned to the middle of the street. This was not an exit to the real world. This was an exposed, fully lit trap. Suddenly, he felt an immense pressure in his ears and a terrifying weight crushing his chest. An overwhelming sensation that he was being watched. He slowly raised his head toward the clear blue sky. It was no ordinary sky. The entire atmosphere began to ripple and split open. Massive openings appeared in the heart of the sky, and from within them, giant eyes emerged. Enormous human eyes the size of clouds, blinking very slowly and looking directly down the street toward him. The entire street, the fake houses and the cars, all of it was nothing but a small exposed stage, and those eyes in the sky were watching him in terrifying silence. Adam froze in his tracks. The giant eyes in the heart of the sky did not move, but their wide pupils were focused directly on him. The terror that paralyzed his limbs was not fear of a physical attack, but an overwhelming realization of his own insignificance, that he was merely a microscopic insect inside a glass box, being watched by an entity whose scale was impossible to comprehend. Panic surged in his mind and pushed him to run. He bolted at full speed on the warm asphalt in the middle of the street, moving away from the eyes. But no matter how far he ran, the eyes filled the sky above him. The environment around him began to collapse. With every step he took, the perfect houses lost their depth and flattened into mere two-dimensional cardboard cutouts. Cars melted and turned into faded patches of color on the asphalt. The street itself began to narrow. At the end of the road, there was no horizon. There was a massive flat wall painted blue to represent the sky. Adam slammed into the wall with force. He felt it with his trembling hands. It was made of thick canvas, stretched over a wooden frame. The eyes in the sky began to blink rapidly, and the sound of the giant eyelids rubbing together created a roar in the air like thunder. Adam found a small slit in the fabric of the fake sky. He inserted his fingers and tore the cloth with all his might. Behind the slit was absolute darkness and intense cold. He did not hesitate. He threw his entire body into the black void before any arms could reach for him or those eyes could catch him. He fell into a total vacuum for several seconds. Then his body hit a hard, cold surface with force. Adam opened his eyes, gasping for breath. He was leaning his back against a hard, rough concrete wall. The air was cold and natural. He looked around in the darkness. He was in the narrow alleyway behind the electronics store, the same place where it all began. He felt the concrete wall, solid, real, and cold. It was no longer a viscous liquid. He quickly pulled his phone out of his pocket, his hand shaking. The screen lit up. The time read 11:59 p.m. Only 1 minute had passed. Adam closed his eyes and let out a fragmented, hysterical laugh, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. It was all just hallucinations, a panic attack, or a terrifying waking nightmare. He had returned to reality. He was safe now. He stood up, brushed the dust off his clothes, and walked out of the dark alley toward the brightly lit main street to head home. The street was completely silent and empty of cars. He took a deep breath of the cold night air, but suddenly stopped. He looked at the ground under the bright light of a lamppost. He had no shadow. He slowly raised his head toward the night sky. There were no stars and no moon. The sky was a dark gray, solid concrete ceiling covering the entire city. And out of nowhere, he began to hear that loud, continuous electrical hum emitting from all directions at once.